Edward, a humble security guard at a top restaurant, welcomed every guest with a smile that masked a life of deep poverty. Behind his cheerful greetings was a hidden world, a loving wife and 2 children living in an abandoned building, surviving on leftover food. But one unexpected night, the kind-hearted restaurant owner, Mr. Hillary, uncovered Edward's silent struggle, and what happened next changed Edward's life forever. This is a powerful story of dignity, sacrifice, and unexpected kindness that reminds us that even in silence, greatness lives. Sit back, relax, and find out what happened in this wonderful story. Every morning before the sun fully climbed the sky, Edward stood tall at the entrance of Grand Royale, the city's most prestigious restaurant. Dressed in his crisp security uniform with polished boots and a welcoming smile, he greeted every customer like royalty. "Good morning, Ma. Welcome to Grand Royale," he would say with a warm nod. To the customers and staff, Edward was just the ever-cheerful security man, punctual, disciplined, and full of respect. No one knew the man behind the smile. Edward's life outside the gates of Grand Royale was a stark contrast. After every 14-hour shift, he walked through dusty alleys, navigating potholes and side paths until he reached an old, abandoned building on the outskirts of town. That was home. The structure had no windows, no paint, and the roof leaked when it rained. But inside were his treasures, his wife, Rachael, and their 2 children, Jerry and Zara. Their laughter, despite the hunger, made the ruins feel like a castle. They had no furniture except for a broken wooden table, thin mats to sleep on, and a small lantern to keep the darkness away. Every evening after work, Edward would take a quiet detour to the restaurant's kitchen. With a humble voice and bowed head, he would ask the kitchen staff, "Please, any food left?" They knew him well and always wrapped up whatever was available, leftover rice, stew, or broken bread. He'd tuck the bag under his jacket and begin the long walk home. To his children, that bag was like a treasure chest. They'd run out screaming, "Daddy's back," and dance around him before devouring the food with joy. Edward never once complained. Not to his wife, not to his bosses, not even to himself. He believed in dignity, in doing his job with pride, and in smiling even when life gave him nothing to smile about. Rachael sat near the edge of the crumbling wall, humming an old lullaby as she patched Zara's torn school uniform with trembling fingers. The needle and thread had been used more times than she could count, but still, she worked patiently. Her face bore quiet strength, the kind carved by hardship and love. Though her stomach rumbled with hunger, her thoughts were not on food. They were on Edward, her husband, who had gone out once again to work with a smile hiding all their pain. Their children, Jerry and Zara, played nearby with sticks and stones, turning debris into toys with innocent imagination. "Look, Mummy, I built a castle," Zara shouted, pointing to a pile of old bricks. Rachael smiled, tears threatening her eyes. These children deserved better, more than broken walls and borrowed dreams. But she never showed her pain. She kept it buried deep like Edward did. Together, they had become masters of masking sorrow with strength. When Edward finally returned that evening, the usual cheer broke out. Jerry rushed to him and grabbed the food bag from under his arm. "Daddy brought jollof rice today," he exclaimed. Edward laughed, tired but thankful. He kissed Rachael's forehead. "Sorry, it's not much. This is all they had today," he whispered. She smiled back, "It's more than enough." As they sat on the floor, sharing the meal and laughter, a quiet silence fell for a moment. Edward looked around at his family, the peeling walls, the cold cement floor, and felt a heaviness he couldn't shake off. He had done everything right, worked hard, stayed honest, but poverty still clung to them like a second skin. Yet, he reminded himself, at least we have each other. And for that, he gave thanks, again and again. It was a Tuesday morning, and the sky looked like it hadn't slept well. Thick gray clouds loomed above, and the air smelt of rain. Still, Edward was already at his post by 6:30 a.m., 30 minutes early as usual. He wiped down the metal gate, straightened the collar of his uniform, and took one long breath before welcoming the first customer. His mind had long learned to separate his home life from his work life. At Grand Royale, he was simply Edward, the dependable man at the gate. But this morning was different. A sleek black SUV pulled up and parked right at the entrance. The driver stepped out and opened the door, and out came a man not often seen at the restaurant. It was Mr. Hillary, the young, wealthy owner of Grand Royale. He had only been spoken of in whispers among the staff. Everyone knew his name, but few had seen him. Rumors swirled about his kindness, his intelligence, and how he had built the business from scratch. Edward stood taller, his voice steady. "Good morning, sir." "Welcome, sir." Mr. Hillary looked at him and gave a brief nod, but something about Edward made him pause for a moment. The way he greeted with genuine warmth, how his eyes crinkled when he smiled, how his posture demanded respect. Hillary didn't say much as he walked past, but his mind made a mental note. That security man, there's something about him. Inside, Hillary spent the morning observing operations. He spoke kindly to the chefs, noted the waitress schedules, and moved from corner to corner like a king inspecting his kingdom. But as he passed by the gate again, he paused and watched Edward opening the door for an elderly woman. He bent slightly to assist her up the steps, smiling all the while. Hillary narrowed his eyes, curiosity sparked. Who is this man? He thought. The day passed like every other. Customers came and went, filling the restaurant with the aroma of grilled chicken, sizzling spices, and laughter. Edward stood through it all, guarding the entrance with calm dedication. No one noticed the ache in his legs or the sharp pangs in his stomach. He hadn't eaten since morning, but he was used to that. Hunger had become a quiet companion over the years. By evening, the crowd had thinned. Staff cleaned tables, washed plates, and cleared leftovers. Edward waited patiently, eyes on the clock. When it struck 9:30 p.m., he removed his cap, wiped the sweat off his brow, and quietly slipped toward the back of the building, toward the kitchen. "Ah, Edward, you came," said Anita, one of the older cooks, holding out a black nylon bag filled with what was left of the day's meals. "It's not much, but it's more than enough." "Thank you," Edward sighed with a grateful smile. He tied the bag carefully, making sure nothing spilled, then tucked it under his jacket like a fragile treasure. But unknown to him, someone had stayed behind. From a distance, behind tinted windows, Mr. Hillary sat in his SUV. He had noticed Edward veer toward the back and, driven by instinct, decided to follow discreetly. When Edward emerged with a hidden bag and began walking down the quiet street, Hillary turned the engine on and drove slowly behind, keeping his lights dimmed. For nearly 30 minutes, he trailed Edward, past noisy junctions, silent alleys, and crumbling sidewalks. Finally, Edward turned into what looked like a forgotten part of the city. Hillary parked and watched from a distance. There it was, an uncompleted building with broken blocks and no front door. And from inside, 2 children ran out with excitement as Edward arrived, hugging him and clinging to the food bag. Hillary's eyes welled up. He watched them settle on the floor and eat with joy, and he remained there quietly, hidden in the shadows, heart heavy with thoughts. That night, he didn't sleep. Mr. Hillary tossed and turned in his king-sized bed, the luxurious silk sheets doing little to bring him comfort. His room was the height of elegance, marble floors, imported furniture, a chandelier that sparkled like a constellation overhead. Yet none of it brought him peace. His mind kept returning to the image of Edward's children eating leftover rice with so much gratitude, as if it were a feast. The sight of the crumbling structure they called home haunted him more than he expected. How could someone so diligent, so respectful, be living in such poverty? He wondered. He sat up, walked to the window, and stared out into the quiet night. His reflection stared back, but behind it he saw Edward's weary smile. The same one he wore every day at work, the same one that masked suffering. Hillary felt a knot in his chest. For years, he had focused on growth, on building his brand, on managing his investments. He had believed he was a kind employer, paid salaries on time, gave bonuses when due, but he had never really seen his people. Until now. The next morning, before the restaurant even opened, Mr. Hillary arrived and called his human resource manager into his office. Increase the salaries of all security staff and kitchen workers, immediately, he ordered. The HR manager blinked. Sir, you heard me. I want a full review of their conditions. Some of them are barely surviving. That's not the kind of company I want to run. Yes, sir. I'll get started right away. Hillary leaned back in his chair, but his heart was still unsettled. He knew what he had done was right, but something told him it wasn't enough. Edward's quiet dignity deserved more than just a pay raise. Much more. As the sun began to set and the restaurant's bustle eased into a lull, Edward finished his shift. He wiped his face with a handkerchief and gave a warm nod to the last customer walking out. Then, like every other evening, he made his way to the back of the kitchen, heart silently hoping the cooks had something left. The aroma of fried plantains and stew still lingered in the air. Anita met him with a tired smile. It's been a slow day, but I managed to save some yam porridge for you. Edward took the nylon bag gently with both hands, his face glowing with gratitude. God bless you, Anita. May your children never lack, he said earnestly. Go home, Edward. Your family will be waiting. He nodded, bowed slightly, and made his way out through the back gate, just as he'd done for years. But tonight, unknown to him, he was not alone. Once again, Mr. Hillary sat in his car, engine off, following quietly at a distance. Edward walked with purpose, his shoes nearly worn out but carrying him faithfully down the same dusty path. He passed honking tricycles, street hawkers, and flashing signboards without a glance. He clutched the food close, knowing it would be their only meal of the day. When he reached the abandoned building, the scene repeated like a ritual. Jerry and Zara ran out, calling, "Daddy, Daddy," while Rachael stood behind them, wiping her hands on her wrapper with a soft smile. Edward knelt and embraced his children tightly. "Look what I brought," he whispered. They gathered on the floor again, sharing the food with laughter and gratitude. Hillary remained parked under a neem tree, eyes moist, hands gripping the steering wheel. This man, this family, he thought. They deserve more. The seed of a decision began to grow in his heart. Mr. Hillary sat in his office the next day, but his mind wasn't in the spreadsheets or emails. His assistant knocked twice before he realized she was at the door. "Sir, your 11 o'clock meeting is waiting." "Cancel it," he said without looking up. She blinked. "Sir? I said cancel it," he repeated, then leaned back in his leather chair, eyes fixed on the ceiling like it held answers to the ache in his chest. Since following Edward home, something had shifted within him. He was a man of business, a planner who rarely acted on impulse, but this wasn't impulse. It was conviction. A quiet voice had rooted itself in his heart, whispering over and over, "Do more. Change his life." Later that day, after the restaurant closed, he stayed behind again, this time intentionally. He wanted to confront the feelings he couldn't shake. He watched as Edward, in his usual quiet humility, greeted the cleaners and waved goodbye to the last kitchen staff. Then, he saw him go to the back, pick up his usual food bag, and prepare for his walk home. Tonight, Hillary didn't follow from afar. He got into his car and slowly tailed Edward again, but this time, he drove a little closer. Closer enough to see the outline of the food in his bag. Closer enough to see the street boys nod at him respectfully. Closer enough to see the hollow shells of the houses they passed. When Edward reached the uncompleted building, Hillary parked 2 houses away and stepped out quietly. He walked closer. From behind a wall, he peeked as Edward was welcomed again by his wife and children. They hugged. They laughed. They prayed before eating. Tears filled Hillary's eyes. How could people with so little still have so much joy? He returned to his car slowly, deeply moved. That night, he wrote a letter to himself. "Tomorrow, I will do what's right, not as a boss, but as a brother." The next morning came with a mild breeze and a sky the color of washed-out denim. Edward rose early, as usual. The floor beneath his mat was cold, and a rat scurried across a corner of the room where broken blocks were stacked. He stretched, careful not to wake Rachael, and tiptoed toward the sectioned corner that served as their kitchen. He boiled water for the children's morning bath using the tiny stove that sometimes needed 3 tries to light. Rachael stirred awake. "You're up early again," she said, rubbing her eyes. "Always. I can't afford to be late," he smiled. "You know Mr. Hillary likes punctual people." Jerry and Zara began to wake, rubbing their tiny fists against sleepy eyes. "Daddy, are you going to bring jollof rice today?" Jerry asked innocently. Edward smiled faintly. "I'll try, son." Meanwhile, back at the restaurant, Mr. Hillary stood at his office window watching the staff arrive. He saw Edward arrive, early as usual, and stand dutifully at his post with that same gentle smile. Something about that man's spirit touched him deeply. It was time to act. Around midday, a message came through Edward's walkie-talkie. "Edward, please report to the manager's office." He paused. Had something gone wrong? Wiping his palms nervously on his trousers, Edward walked briskly to the office area. He knocked gently and was told to enter. To his surprise, Mr. Hillary himself was seated behind the desk. He stood up and offered Edward a seat. "Good afternoon, sir," Edward Said, voice low with respect. Mr. Hillary smiled. "Edward, sit. There's something important we need to talk about." Edward's heart pounded. He had never been called in like this. What could it be? Mr. Hillary looked directly into his eyes and said softly, "I know everything. I followed you home." The world around Edward seemed to stop. Edward's mouth went dry. "He followed me?" The words rang in his ears like a quiet alarm. His hands gripped the armrest of the chair, unsure whether to be ashamed or afraid. Mr. Hillary leaned forward, his voice calm and sincere. "I followed you that night, Edward. I saw everything. How you took leftover food home. How your children ran to you. How you all prayed before eating. How joyful they were despite everything." Edward lowered his gaze, blinking rapidly to hold back tears. I'm sorry, sir," he whispered, his voice shaking. "I didn't mean to bring shame to your establishment. I only wanted my family to eat. I didn't know anyone saw me." Mr. Hillary stood and walked around the desk until he stood beside him. He placed a hand gently on Edward's shoulder. "Shame? Edward, you brought honor to this place. Do you know how rare it is to find a man like you? A man who works with integrity, who smiles through hardship, who carries the weight of his family without ever asking for pity." Edward looked up slowly, tears sliding freely down his cheeks now. "I saw your home," Hillary continued. "That building isn't fit for animals, let alone a family. And yet you still came to work every day, early, smiling, helpful, respectful. You never asked for a raise, never complained. You just served." Edward sniffled, unable to speak. "From today," Hillary said, now with firm conviction, "you are no longer just a regular security officer. I am making you my personal security detail. Your salary will be tripled. And Edward, I bought you a house." Edward gasped audibly, eyes wide, lips trembling. A house?" Hillary nodded. "A real home. For you, Rachael, Jerry, and Zara. You deserve it." The silence that followed was broken only by Edward's sobs, deep, grateful sobs. A door had just opened in his life, and Grace walked in. Edward left Mr. Hillary's office in a daze, the weight of the world lifting from his shoulders. His mind raced, replaying every word spoken. A new chapter was unfolding, one he had only dared to dream about in quiet moments. For the first time in years, hope didn't feel like a distant star but a warm light shining right in front of him. That night, as he approached the crumbling building he called home, the nylon bag with leftover food felt lighter in his hands. When Jerry and Zara rushed out to meet him, their bright eyes reflecting the dim streetlight, Edward's heart swelled with a newfound joy. Rachael met him at the doorway, worry fading into astonishment as Edward began to share the unbelievable news. His voice trembled, but the smile that spread across his face was genuine and free from the usual exhaustion. I'm going to have a new job, Rachael. One with a better salary. And, God willing, a real home for us." Tears streamed down Rachel's cheeks. "Edward, is this truly happening? After all these years?" He nodded slowly, pulling her close. "Yes, my love. We're going to have a place where the children can run without fear, where we can build a future." The children clapped their hands in excitement, unaware of the full weight of the moment but thrilled by the promise of better days. That night, Edward lay awake, listening to the peaceful breathing of his sleeping family. His heart was full, fuller than it had been in years. The struggle was far from over, but for the first time, he felt the sweet taste of hope. Tomorrow was the beginning of a new journey. The morning sun cast a soft golden glow as Edward stepped out into the cool air, feeling a lightness he hadn't known in years. His uniform, once a symbol of struggle, now felt like a badge of honor. Today, he walked into the restaurant with a heart filled with quiet pride. His colleagues noticed the difference immediately. Where he once appeared tired and reserved, he now carried an air of calm confidence. Throughout the day, Edward's smile was warmer, his eyes brighter. He greeted customers with the same kindness but now with a hint of hope behind it. Whispers floated through the staff room. "Did you hear about Edward? He's got a promotion." The news lifted Edward's spirit, but he remained humble, knowing this was just the beginning. As the day ended, Mr. Hillary summoned him to the office again. "Edward, the SUV will be here tomorrow morning. It's time for your family to move to a better place." Edward's throat tightened. "Thank you, sir. I won't forget this." Mr. Hillary smiled. "You deserve every good thing. Early the next day, Edward, Rachael, Jerry, and Zara stood by the roadside, their faces a mixture of excitement and disbelief. When the shiny black SUV pulled up, Jerry's eyes widened, and Zara grabbed her mother's hand tightly. The journey took them through bustling streets and into a neighborhood where manicured lawns and elegant homes stood tall. Edward felt like a visitor in a world he'd only seen through passing glances on his way to work. As the SUV found its way to their new address, Rachael whispered, "Could this really be our home?" Edward nodded, overwhelmed. "Yes. A fresh start for all of us." The gates opened to reveal a beautiful mansion, its walls glowing softly under the morning sun. Edward's breath caught as he stepped inside. The floors gleamed, the rooms were spacious, and every corner seemed filled with promise. Rachael wandered from room to room, her eyes shimmering with tears. "It's more than I ever dared hope for," she said. Jerry and Zara raced through the halls, their laughter filling the vast spaces. For the first time, the children played freely without fear or hunger shadowing their joy. Edward stood by the window, watching his family, feeling the heaviness of the past lift. That evening, Edward and his family visited Mr. Hillary's home. The warm welcome and the soft light inside contrasted with the cold nights they had endured. Hillary listened patiently as Rachael expressed their heartfelt thanks. "You gave us hope," she said, tears in her eyes. "A home where we can dream and live without fear." Hillary smiled gently. "Everyone deserves a chance, and sometimes, all it takes is a little kindness to change a life." Edward felt a deep gratitude that words couldn't fully express. In the days that followed, Edward embraced his new life with determination. He planned for his children's education, set goals for Rachael's well-being, and dreamed openly for the first time in years. Each morning, as he donned his new uniform, Edward felt a surge of pride and responsibility. He knew he was standing on the edge of something greater, ready to leap into a future filled with possibility. But life was not without its challenges. Some co-workers eyed Edward with suspicion, whispers of jealousy lingering behind their backs. Adjusting to his new role brought pressure, expectations were higher, and Edward often felt the weight of scrutiny. Yet, he remained focused, drawing strength from his family and the promise of a better tomorrow. Mr. Hillary became more than an employer, he was a mentor and friend. He taught Edward about leadership, security protocols, and the importance of integrity. Edward soaked up every lesson, eager to prove himself worthy of the trust placed in him. Their growing friendship became a pillar in Edward's life, a beacon of hope and guidance. Moved by his own journey, Edward began volunteering on weekends at a local shelter. There, he met others trapped in poverty and despair. He shared his story, offering encouragement and reminding them that even the darkest nights can give way to dawn. This new purpose enriched his soul and deepened his commitment to making a difference. The family flourished in their new home. Jerry and Zara excelled in school, fueled by their parents' love and support. Rachael found part-time work, regaining confidence and independence. Together, they faced life's trials, united by a bond stronger than hardship. Years later, Edward stood at the entrance of the restaurant, watching new employees begin their days. He saw in them the same spark he once had, the desire to serve, to provide, to rise. With a heart full of gratitude, he vowed to always be a beacon of hope, a living testament to the power of kindness and the possibility of change. Because sometimes, all it takes is one act of compassion to transform a life forever. Edward had needs. Yes. Did he give up? No. Did he steal? No. He asked for it. This story teaches us that true strength lies not in wealth or status, but in kindness, humility, and perseverance. Sometimes, the greatest heroes are those who quietly carry their burdens with a smile. And when we choose to see and help others in need, we have the power to change lives, including our own. What's the lesson you learned from this story? Drop it in the comment section because I will like to read them. And guess what? I have another amazing story coming up soon. So subscribe now and join the Firelight Tale family so you will be the first person to watch it when it drops. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate